Hello everybody, I am Charlie from Dr. Wen, and welcome along to a brand new Doctor Who YouTube video. So as promised, I am back, and today I thought I would do a pretty big ranking video. I've seen lots of people on YouTube do this, so I thought I would too. And I have several unpopular opinions on this, and that is all 10th Doctor episodes ranked. So if you don't know, the 10th Doctor is one of the most popular Doctors ever. He was played by David Tennant from 2005 to 2010, and he's one of the longest running Doctors. You know, he's up there with John Pertwee and Tom Baker and people like that. So yes, he's one of the very popular Doctors. So I've been very excited to do this video. I'm pretty sure he has 36 stories, it might be 39, I'm pretty sure it's 36 though. And yes, I'm basically going to be ranking all of those stories in order from worst to best like usual. Two-parters I am grouping together as usual, and I have several extremely unpopular opinions, so yeah, feel free to, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my daily content, and like this video if you enjoy it, and comment on your ranking, or if you disagree or agree. I'd love to hear your opinions on this as well. So yes, without further ado, let's get into this video. And I'm just going to add, I'm not really going to talk about each episode in too much detail. I've already done that in my other ranking videos. I'm just going to kind of go over them briefly because there are so many. I don't really want it to be an hour long. So here we go. Last place, The Waters of Mars. Yes, it's an extremely unpopular opinion. I just don't really like it. I think the plot is a bit clunky. I don't really like the whole concept of Time Lord Victorious. The monster is pretty cool though, and, it still has its redeeming qualities. But yeah, it's not my cup of tea. Next up, Daleks and Manhattan Evolution of the Daleks. This has so much potential to be a really interesting Dalek story, and it threw out some really interesting concepts and ideas at us, but it just failed to deliver lots of them in so many ways. It just kind of felt a bit forced, and the resolution still baffles me. I still don't really understand it. So yeah, it's very low down. Next up, Fear Her, an episode you were probably expecting to be lower down. Yeah, I don't really see... I don't really see what they were going for with this story. Rose is annoying as ever. She is so annoying in this. I really don't like her. The villain is really weird, and the plot just feels so annoying and forced. It feels so filler that sometimes that's an okay thing, sometimes in this case it really isn't. So yeah, it's still got some okay things about it though. Next up, The Lazarus Experiment. It tries to be a fast-paced, interesting story that could have worked had the monster not completely distracted from everything else. I know this was, like 13 years ago, but this is terrible CGI and just, doesn't really make up for the okay, half-decent plot that's got going for it. It's still enjoyable in some ways though, just the monster really puts me off, and that whole scene in the church wasn't really needed. It should have just finished at the lab. Tooth and Claw, an episode lots of people seem to actually quite like, just a fun little historical. I don't really like it. The werewolf doesn't look that great. It's not the best villain, it's just, something we've seen a million times before, but an alien, which is a lot of Doctor Who episodes, by the way. And yeah, it's still okay, I suppose. Rose is incredibly annoying, but it does do a little bit of setup for Torchwood and the finale, sort of. So yeah, it's still okay though, it's not bad. Next up, New Earth, another Series 2 story, and David Tennant's second story as the 10th Doctor, and yeah, it's not that great. It's not bad by any means. I think it does have some interesting things, like the infected people, like, chasing him around. It's kind of a hot, sort of like a creepy, monster based in the siege story. That really works. It also has got some setup for gridlock with the face of Bo and things like that, but it's just a bit silly, and the plot feels a bit too forced, and yeah, it just doesn't really work in a lot of ways. However, it's not terrible. Next up, we're getting onto some very meh episodes. Not bad, not awful, just meh. The Unicorn and the Wasp, Series 4 story with Donna. Donna is brilliant with the Doctor, by the way. They are absolutely brilliant, and this is probably what pushes the episode up for me. But the side characters, they're okay, some of them are quite annoying actually, like that, pretty much. There's a couple of women in this who are incredibly annoying, and there's this boy as well. It's quite weird, and the Wasp is a pretty stupid villain, not gonna lie. It's not the best. Next up, The Idiot's Lantern, a Series 2 story, and it's just really, really weird. The villain, The Wire, is not menacing at all. Rose is at her most annoying in the story. I cannot stand her in this. And yeah, it's just pretty weird, to be honest. They tried a kind of companion light episode, but it didn't really work because the companion was there half the time. It doesn't really work on a lot of levels. The Next Doctor. This is a very interesting story. Lots of people seem to actually not really like this that much. I think it's good. It's not meh. I think we're kind of going into good territory now. It's very, very good. No, not very. It's good. The Cybermen are interesting, quite like the Cyber Leader, but the plot feels a bit strange, and it has some really interesting ideas like Jackson Lake, but they're abandoned in the first 10 minutes, and we've got a Cyberman story. It's kind of got a lot of plot that would have been better with a two-parter, maybe Christmas and New Year. I'm not too sure, but that would have worked a lot better, definitely. Next up, The Christmas Invasion. This was the very first story of the 10th Doctor, so it's quite significant, and for the first 40 minutes the 10th Doctor isn't even there. It's Rose whining about how the Doctor won't wake up, or if it even is the Doctor, and the Sycorax and Harriet Jones. It just feels a bit too weird for me. It's like a Dr. Light story, that the second the 10th Doctor steps out of the TARDIS, it's just brilliant. I love the 10th Doctor in this, he's awesome, but he's not there 2/3 of the time, so I've got to put slightly lower down. Next up, The Fires of Pompeii. This is an interesting one because it's got lots of good features, like that. It's a nice little historical. We have Peter Capaldi who plays the 12th Doctor and Karen Gillan who plays Amy later on, but it's plot-wise it's not that great. I like the scene where the 10th Doctor goes and saves them, even though he wasn't really supposed to. But the Pyroviles, yeah, they're not the best villains. It's okay. Next up, The Runaway Bride, the second Christmas special from 2006, and yeah, it's not that great. It's better than The Christmas Invasion because it actually has the Doctor in quite a lot, and Donna's quite funny actually. I'm glad they did this before Partners in Crime. I think it works incredibly well. The Rachnos is an okay villain, but everything else, it just feels a bit weird and forced and not really directly tied to the plot in any way. It's just a bit of a strange, unforgettable one, to be honest. But when I rewatch it, it's actually not really that bad. Next up, The Shakepeare Co. A brilliant poster. I actually really like this. For an okay story, I think this is like a 7.9 or something, so it's good, but it's not great. I think the finale's pretty cool, and the Carrionites are very interesting villains, but the 10th Doctor and Martha are brilliant. I really like Martha as a companion. This is kind of her first adventure that's not set on Earth, so it's, well, not in present-day Earth anyway. And yeah, that's quite significant, but other than that, it's a fairly weak story with lots of filler, especially in that underground sort of prison place. Yeah, that's a bit weird. Next up, Partners in Crime. I'm going to go a bit faster now because I've already done this for 8 minutes. Yeah, it's okay. Donna's really, really good, actually, quite funny. A very light-hearted story, and the Adipose, they aren't the best. I don't really think they're that great, to be honest. Next up, Love and Monsters. Incredibly underrated. It's not even that bad, to be honest. Yeah, it's okay. The Absorbaloff is a terrible villain, by the way. That's what drags this down. Other than that, it's a pretty solid story, let's be honest. Dr. Light, which I'm glad they did, yeah, it's not terrible. The Sontaran Stratagem, The Poison Sky. An interesting two-parter Sontaran story that, when I go back and look at it, it's actually not that great. It's got lots of filler in the plot and should have been a one-parter. I'm glad they introduced Unit though, reintroduced Martha, I really like that. And yeah, it's not all that bad. I prefer the classic Sontaran look, however, still pretty good. Planet of the Ood, an interesting 10th Doctor and Donna story, which I think works incredibly well. I think I've given this an 8.4, so we're getting into properly good territory now. Which, I like talking about these episodes a lot more than the bad and okay episodes. Yeah, this is pretty good actually. I quite like the setting of the Ood sphere, and it's quite creepy at times. I like it. The Impossible Planet, The Satan Pit. Slightly overrated story, I've given this an 8.5 as well. It's quite creepy as well with like the beast underground. That whole scene was actually brilliant, by the way. And it's quite creepy with the guy with the symbols on his face and the red eyes. I think they're genuinely quite scary sometimes. But anything else, it's okay. Rose is incredibly annoying in this. Gridlock. I like Gridlock, it's really, really good. It does some interesting world building for New Earth, how everyone's been forced underground into these like cars. I think it's really interesting. And the Macra, they're there, they don't really do that much, and this should have been, a villain-free episode, just kind of and it's sort of adventure story rather than actual sci-fi. However, it still works and it's still really, really good, and I like the face of Bo kind of setting up Utopia with the "You Are Not Alone." That was actually brilliant. Smith & Jones, Series 3 opener, it's pretty good. It's not very memorable, even though it's Martha's first story, it's not that memorable, but it's really good, a great starting point for the show as well. You know, if you want to start watching it, I recommend here if you don't want any Rose. Yeah, the 10th Doctor's really good, Martha is brilliant, and the Judoon, they're interesting actually. They're not my favourite villains, but they are really, really good, and it's an interesting concept that we didn't really see in Classic Who. Next up, Army of Ghosts Doomsday, the worst 10th Doctor finale, however it's still brilliant. We have the epic war between the Cybermen and the Daleks, and that's brilliant. Yeah, it's all really, really good, and Rose's departure I didn't particularly care for, but I still really like Torchwood in it, and Jackie, you know, it's all quite good. Next up, The Doctor's Daughter, incredibly underrated story, interesting war-torn planet setting. We've got, Jenny's a brilliant character, I'm really glad she got her own big finish, and yeah, it's really, really good actually. Next up, The Voyage of the Damned, 2007 Christmas special, and it's brilliant, it's really, really good. Astrid Peth would be a brilliant companion, we have the hosts which are actually really creepy villains, and yeah, we've got this like weird space Titanic, it's all a bit crazy and I love it, it's so good. Next up, School Reunion, a brilliant story with Sarah Jane and the Doctor, that was brilliant. The Krillitanes are interesting villains, and it feels so Classic Who, just in terms of quite a simple alien invasion story. You know, there's no plot holes, there's no plot threads, there's no, you know, timey-wimey nonsense, it's just alien invasion, they've got to stop it, and it's brilliant. I love K9 as well, and Mickey, it's all really, really good. Rise of the Cybermen, The Age of Steel. This is an epic Cybermen two-parter in the middle of Series 2, and it's awesome. Rose isn't even that bad, and I quite like Mickey's alter ego Ricky, and I was quite sad when he died actually. And the Cyber Leader's brilliant, the Cybermen, you know, reintroduces them really well, and yeah, it's great. Next up, Midnight. This is just awesome. I really, really love the story Midnight. You know, creepy setting, how we don't actually see the villain, like that villain kind of, you know, taking over the Doctor's voice. It was genuinely really, really scary at times, and I really liked it. And Patrick Troughton's son, David Troughton, was actually in the story as the professor with the bald head and glasses. Just a little bit of information. Next up, The Stolen Earth Journey's End, another finale from Series 4, and it's awesome. Davros is brilliant, you know, Dalek Sec, we have all of them, it's kind of like the equivalent of Avengers Endgame if you've seen it, all the companions coming together, it's just awesome and epic, and I love it. Next up, Planet of the Dead, it's probably the most unpopular opinion on this list, besides Love and Monsters. It's really good, it's an interesting story with the kind of, you know, the beings that kind of feed on all this buildings and stuff, the wormhole, it's just a really fun, nice story, and I don't really see what's wrong with it. 42, a Series 3 story that I love. It's genuinely quite creepy with the sun kind of infecting the Doctor, the whole monster saying burn with me, that was really creepy, and the whole timer aspect makes it really intense and fast paced. Yeah, it's awesome. Next up, Turn Left, a Series 4 story that some people say it's filler, it really isn't. It sets up the finale incredibly with Rose across Donna's kind of own reality, where she's got to like die at the end and sent back in time, her turning left or right or something and changing the course of human events after the Doctor dying. It's incredibly interesting and I really like it. It's just interesting to see what would have happened if the Doctor hadn't been there. I think it's incredibly, well executed. Next up, The Girl in the Fireplace, a brilliant emotional sort of love story across space and time. It is really cool, and maybe not quite as good as everyone says it is, but I still love it, it's still brilliant. Next up, Utopia, The Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords. A brilliant story, the Master's great in this, the Toclafane are really interesting, and I really like the Master's reveal in Utopia. All of it's just great, I really love the story. We're getting into some really good episodes here. Next up, Human Nature and the Family of Blood, a Series 3 story. It's really interesting to see the 10th Doctor as human. It's a brilliant performance from David Tennant, and all of this is really good. The Scarecrow's a Family of Blood, all of it. It's just such a classic story, and it's just such a simple plot that's executed so incredibly well. It's really interestingly done. Next up, The End of Time, the 10th Doctor's final story, and it's brilliant. The 10th Doctor is brilliant. Wilf is amazing. All of this, a master, the Time Lords, all of it, it's just so good, and a really sad farewell to the 10th Doctor. It's just great. Okay then, next up we have Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. And yes, you may notice my webcam may have turned off. That's probably because it was being a bit dodgy, so I just decided to turn it off for now. But yeah, anyway, Silence in the Library, Forest of the Dead, it's a brilliant story. I really love it. It's an awesome two-parter set in this really awesome, like, library planet setting. The whole Vashta Nerada, they're really creepy. I actually did an episode of my fan series on them, and yeah, go and check that out. I actually really enjoyed doing that. And yeah, all of it's really good. The 10th Doctor and Donna, River Song, we have everything, and it's just so awesome and really scary as well. Finally, Blink. Number 1, first place, Blink. It is awesome. Everything about this is so good. It explores the consequences of time travel incredibly well. It's really interesting how it's actually Dr. Light and manages to pull it off so well compared to Love and Monsters. The Weeping Angels are incredibly scary, and I just love it. It is so good. Everything about it is awesome. It's not my favourite Doctor Who story ever. That probably goes to World Enough and Time and The Doctor Falls. This is still definitely in my top 5 though. Next time. So, tomorrow I'm going to be doing The Horror of Skaro Chapter 3. So, Chapter 3 of Story 2 in my fan series, where, the tale will continue with the Doctor and Jamie on this war-torn Earth between the humans and the Daleks, where they will attempt to try and kill the Daleks' leader. So, I will see you then, and goodbye.